chair future panel. I'm going to ask Ross Hussey to come up and act as facilitator. And I'd like to welcome Duncan Morrow, the Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Community Relations Council. Duncan, you're very welcome. And other panel members, Bill Manwaring, our candidate for West Belfast, Lesley Macaulay, our candidate for East London Dairy, and Kenny Donaldson, our candidate for Ramada South Tyrone. Please make your way to the platform.
Well, the first question I have is from Terry Bill and Andrew South.
The question I have is, shrinking funding is now going to be available for community relations. How are you going to make sure that that gets to where it has to be? Because in my experience, being involved in some training courses and things like this, a lot of money has been poured into training people who don't want to do community relations. Most of the courses I've been on has been as an interested party, sitting in a room full of school teachers who are there because it's a day off.
Question, so I will just throw that immediately to Duncan Morrow.
First of all, I feel your pain. This is something I suppose that has been the bane of our life. It's getting people to see that community relations isn't just some activities of a few nice people meeting other people in a room. And I suppose that's what I'm trying to get at here is there is a hugely important community side to this because the impacts are really in real lives and real places. So we need to start tackling some stuff. But we probably now need to stop thinking that the only things that need to be done are by small people in local communities, but we need to build on some of those things. We need to start talking about, what does this mean for our town centres? Can everybody access our town centres freely? Can they actually, can the assets that we build, our theatres, our cinemas, things like McDonald's, are they actually open to people? I went and did some work in Lurgan with a group of young people, and it still stuck with me actually, in which it became clear in the conversations, and people can correct me, Lurgan better than me, but the broad picture I got was this, was that Lurgan Park, which I have to say I was ignorant of until I went to look at it and found it was one of the most stunning pieces of urban landscape that I've ever seen, was essentially not regarded by the Catholic part of the population as a place that they went. So, first, for the Protestant young people, they told me, after the toilets we don't go, there's a McDonald's up at the other end of the road that they won't go to. So simple things like a McDonald's are not actually open to half of the young people in the community. And at night, the town centre is essentially empty because it's a standoff zone. Now the consequences of that are obviously for the young people. The consequences of that are obviously for the businesses. The consequences of that are for that Lurgan does not develop in the way as a town that it should, in terms of the huge asset that's already there, like its park, for example. The consequences are the town centre, which is economically dead and has no nighttime economy. And what I was told, now, if somebody wants to know me different, is that there's no cinema, and people go out of Lurgan to go to activities in different directions in different ways. Now, so, first of all, I don't think we're asking for lots of additional money for lots of community groups to meet. I do think that we have to assume now that in all of community life, community relations, as in meeting other people around the neighbourhood, will be part of normal. And I want to mainstream that now. I don't think it should be additional activity. I think it should be part of what everybody does, just as what we experience as normal. Second of all, I think that we need to be putting into discussions about how do we connect this, not so much into more money, but using the discussions in towns like Lurgan to actually tackle some of these questions so that we see real changes for real people. And then at the third level to say that we get leadership from community and from political leadership to say these are priorities, not second-rate issues, because they make a huge difference to the people of this community. So I suppose these are my priorities now.
I'm out with communities. I'm working with them at where they're at. Some are not ready to take those steps that that actually I cried when we said yes to it. I'm working in a loyalist estate in a rural town, and I put to them, would you like the opportunity to meet Republican ex-prisoners? And I honestly thought, it's too much. And I've worked with this group, they trust me, they know me, I have taken them through a process. And I thought, I think they're ready to go to the next level, because this is not touchy-feely stuff. And they debated, and we discussed it, and they come back, and this week they said, yes, we want to meet with Republican ex-prisoners. And these are loyalists that I never thought ever would have happened to say yes. They are ready to take that step. And that's where we are, that's where some communities are. And I think it's really important as politicians that we are leading, we are showing leadership, we are showing vision, which this document lacks, I have to say. It lacks in action points and steps. That needs to be clarified. But people on the ground need to see political leadership. And a lot of people are ready to take those steps. Now, some aren't, and that's fine.
Bill?
I think the point on funding is very important. In my day job, I work with a charity that focuses on individuals who suffer from alcohol or substance abuse. And my organisation has recently received funding from the CRC, Victims Money, to be able to work with individuals and families who often are transgenerational victims of our troubles. These are people who maybe didn't experience the issues directly themselves, but their parents or their grandparents have been directly involved. I think what we need to do with our funding, just to cover this point first, is to make sure that our funding is going to those who are best placed to get impact on the ground and create benefit for those who need it most. I think we have to use the more limited resources we're going to be getting to make sure those resources are more targeted. And I must say, I'd just like to thank Duncan and the CRC for the work they do to ensure that funding does get to groups that need the funding to be able to address the issues on the ground that they're working with. I think the broader issue is very much how we get individuals with their own experiences of the troubles and their own issues around personal identity or community identity to be able to come together, to feel comfortable breaking down those personal barriers without feeling that by involving themselves in something that challenges them or their community is stigmatizing them to a place outside of them and their community. I think something we need to be doing is promoting the fact that it's a positive step to move forward and to look to the future rather than to worry about those who are leaving in the past.
Kelly?
Okay, Ross, thanks very much. I suppose I mean this with respect. The fact that Duncan Morrow is here today and is instilling the same language and the same virtues, if you like, that would have been done 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you may have been viewed by some, Duncan, as an intellect, well-meaning, but naive. And to think that today, in 2010, you're here, and people are moving on your ground, what you have assumed back then. And I think it says a lot for the CRC's ethos. So you've won the battle on that one. But I suppose a point that comes to me in this is that how will we ever know we actually made it? Northern Ireland, when 1988 came, I think a lot of people thought that actually the taps were turned on and we were going to be back to selling something on holiday. It was a great uncle of mine who's passed away now, and he was a wise man. And what he said was this: you will only know that Northern Ireland is made as a normal society whenever you meet someone for the first time. You don't spend the first 5 minutes trying to work out what they are. And it's not that you're in any way being sectarian for that, but it's a protectionist attitude. You can have an open discussion with someone who is completely different to you, and they may say that they're going to a GA match, you could be going to an Orange Parade, and that's okay to say that. And on that point, and it's been very much to the fore in the media around the GA and this issue of symbolism of having our party leader to the public opposing this. But let's get real on this. There are 4 stages of development in Northern Ireland. There's firstly what we have in terms of conflict. We then have a peaceful, yet, if you want to call it nicely, a coexistence. We then have integration and interdependence. And then we have assimilation. Assimilation, in my view, is not where we want to go. Where we want to banish almost our histories, our identities, and become some fraudulent new force, all of us. That's not who we are. Have pride and respect and integrity for who you come from, but actually be prepared to look at the other man and say, you have integrity to come from there as well.
I think there's no doubt that some people see community relations as something you have to turn up and do this course because that's another tick in the box. I see Councillor Wilson sitting down there, and because of him, I was sent on a course which lasted a full year. Probably it took me that long to be nice to people. But I have to say, it was one of the most eye-opening courses I've ever been on. It was Peace 3 funded, and it was a fellowship of cuisines. And when you can see that people from out and out Republican backgrounds can accept that they have relatives who served in the British Army, and they can accept the reasons why those people served in the British Army, and you can see them remembering those people, there are steps that are going forward. But unfortunately, there's a lot of time that we mark time. But an interesting question, an interesting answer to that. I'm now going to throw this to the audience, and again, I'm always blinded by lights. Many of the ones that I should have saw the light a long time ago, when I'm blinded by lights, reminds me by time in the police, and she'd be standing here with a red light trying to make us stop this vehicle that's coming at me. For all I know, Peter Robinson's driving it. But anyway, I understand there are questions in the audience, so if you raise your hand to get a microphone to you, we will do that. Oh, good Lord. Alright, we'll take Andy Wilson anyway, go on.
It's Fran Ross. My prepared question has been addressed by Dr. Morrow, so I'm going to throw a googly to all members of the panel. Could they give me in one sentence their definition of a shared future?
For me, shared future in Northern Ireland is one community, and it's about understanding that whenever we work together, all of us, for a common purpose, that we can get the best out of all ourselves.
Accepting others and expecting them to accept us.
To me, it's about living together as one community and respecting difference.
Duncan? I'll give you a sense of that. I did research on this. When I was in the university, so we asked people what they thought community was. And I have to say, it showed me that in the end, most people saw behind it a wolf, behind sheep's clothing, to be honest with you. We asked some people, they told us actually what it was an ill-disguised plot to rumble Unionists into United Ireland against their will. That was number one. Then there was the other side, which was a covert action part of British government counter-insurgency strategy. You might imagine who said that. And then the civil service, the head of civil service, the head of civil service, because I would identify him, he wasn't actually the head of civil service, he was a senior civil servant. We asked him what's community relations, and he said, the cucumber sandwiches of policy, by which he meant soft and chewy and not very nice. I have come to the conclusion that a shared future says at one level something very simple, which is we're going to build a future with others. And if that sounds too simple, put it the other way around, which is the history of this place has been trying to almost build a future as if the others don't exist. Once you start to build a future on the basis that we're going to make it with the others, in a sense it changes everything, because that has to be factored in to policy across the board. So if you ask me what my definition of it looks like, it is for me, we as a community have taken the conclusion that whatever the outcome we have here, we're going to do it with each other as opposed to trying to exclude each other. And it's fundamentally, it's to emphasise, if you like, the hope in this community rather than the fear.
A shared future, Andy, is when everybody realises we are right and votes Ulster Unionist. Have we another question in the audience? Over here from you.
I'm just like to ask the panel, do you think we had a strict enough equality regime in Northern Ireland?
I don't believe that a strict equality regime is what we need to be looking for. It's not about having a regime that forces people to recognise each other. It's about creating opportunities for people to understand and accept and want to work with each other. Probably doesn't answer your question, but that's where I stand on it.
I have to say, I totally agree with that. And sometimes it hampers good work being done as well. But we don't want to force. It's not about forcing you to learn about the other side. It's not about that. But I find there is, in general, a willingness to learn, and people want to learn. And can I just say as well, learning about other cultures, other faiths, leads to your own culture and faith being enhanced and enriched. It doesn't dilute it at all. It's being enriched. Actually, one of the reasons why I'm sitting on this platform today, because I've done so much of that work.
Duncan?
I think that it's absolutely vital that everybody in this community knows that they are equal value, and that any notion of discrimination or exclusion on the basis of some presumed characteristic is simply not acceptable in the modern world. That's not where we are, it's not where we can go. And there's no doubt in my mind that this interconnectedness, we're on this work that I'm involved in, as it's already been alluded to, is tied up with a whole lot of jargon and a whole lot of ideology. Let me say this. I am absolutely sure that a shared future depends absolutely on not just a law, but actually an assumption that we will treat each other equally, and that equality in this kind of access is an absolute given. So equality is core to good relations. On the other hand, I would want to put it the other way around, which is you can't, people will not treat each other equally if they think we're enemies. Because to be honest with you, you don't want to treat people who wish you harm equally. So good relations and equality belong together. It is my view that in an ideal world, and this is a personal view, all of these things should be done as a matter of almost taken for granted, rather than that they're done through law. I'm absolutely sure that we still need laws and frameworks within which to take ourselves, but I am also sure that this issue, that we will have arrived when all citizens of this place know that they're of equal value, that they're treated equally, and that the impediments that are put in place are ones which belong to everybody, but are not directed at them in the form of discrimination in any way.
Kenny? Thanks, Ross. I suppose I would make a party political point here. The equality agenda obviously belongs more so to one political party than others in Sinn Féin. And I think it's no coincidence that the CSI strategy at its heart, it is totally corrupt, because the doctrine of that particular movement is about ensuring that we don't have any natural integration in Northern Ireland. Don't forget that the aim of the Republican movement is to actually create the circumstances where the Northern Ireland state is overthrown. No one should ever forget that. Sadly, the partners in government who are joining hip to them are also of the ilk of ourselves alone, and are essentially two sides of the one coin. So what we have to do is to reassert, I believe, responsibility and citizenship foremost within actually our lives in Northern Ireland. Going forward, the Northern Ireland Republic haven't taken a great deal of credit in having sucked in those parties into the centre of the political system. They did so very, very intelligently. But the message that has to come from this party going forward is that actually that's not needed anymore. And if you want to give us the ammunition to actually finish the job that we started, to move this place to the next level, then actually it's the middle ground that needs to come back to the fore. And until that happens, this place is going to be two different countries essentially. That's what it is.
I'm not going to comment on the point. However, I will. I think equality at times has become an industry. I think equality at times has become an industry for some people to peddle, to for some people to stir up, for some people to actually make a very good living out of it. I certainly have no problems with equality on the grounds of disability, on the grounds of sex, on any of those natures at all. But then when we go down the lines of religious discrimination, there are some people who are certainly making an industry out of it. And you are either this or that, you can get a job because you're this or that. Why? Whatever happened to the best person for the job? Why should somebody have to employ somebody because he, she, or it happens to be a certain religion? That is the figure that you have to get for that job. And we have seen it in policing, and unfortunately, we should not have an imposed 50-50 situation in that type of scenario. And at times, you say people are making an industry out of it. You're a Protestant Catholic. Are you? We don't have a society that's Protestant Catholic. We have a society that's Protestant Catholic, non-believer. We have an increased number of non-Christian denominations. However, I'll not go off on that tangent, or I'll be here until tomorrow. Some of you, I think, want to go. So, again, back to the Roman mic. If you can grab somebody down the back. I'm trying to avoid Bobby McConnell. Maybe, no, I think we'll go to Bobby McConnell because we know that he's going to say something controversial. You wait till you get the microphone. Because with the microphone, I can switch you off. Hold on.
I would agree with Kenny that we have come a long way, and all credit to you, Duncan, and for the efforts that you have put into it. But what do you think, as a panel, is our biggest challenge for the future, and how should we address that challenge?
One of them being is to get this right, to get this right so it will work. I mean, I see this as the overarching principle to everything that we're talking about today, to the economy, to education, and of course my beloved East London area with the tourism that we're trying to attract. If this is right, we will get inward investment for tourism, business, and so on. So this is very, very important that we get this right.
Duncan?
To identify single channels, of course, a huge risk. There's a lot of them out there, and I mean, go for economics, you could go for the fact that there in education remains a huge issue. You could take any of these things. I come to the conclusion that we still have a very big issue, which is that the past is a massive obstacle to the future. In other words, we have to jump over something here, which is people have grounds for their fears. People have grounds for their fears. These didn't come out of nowhere. People know in this community that terrible things happen to people, and they have done, and are still at risk in various places as well, by the way, so I don't want to say it's over either. And for that reason, the kind of things that we've done defensively against each other are usually understood as good common sense. We didn't do it because we had to, we did it because we were forced to. I have to say, for example, that is why, it's good common sense in this place not to go into the past, because as soon as we go into the past, we get lost there. And I'm actually not suggesting we do, but I am suggesting that the big obstacle in taking the risk is actually taking the risk in education. Can we do some interesting experiments with each other about how it might be possible? It's not about forcing everybody into single type of schools or integrated schools, but it is saying, something, we need to be freed up to do some things differently. Maybe it's share campuses, maybe it's share sports facilities, maybe it's share expertise in languages or science labs, maybe it's have village schools which are co-organised rather than have buses all over the place. But all that's joined up by one issue, which is the big issue is, can we take the risk to be partners with people who were previously people who we thought it was perfectly okay to defend ourselves against? And I think this is where this question of leadership comes. It is really imperative that in politics, first of all, where there are risks, they're named and identified and ways forward are found. And second of all, that we take steps in everything we do to give people confidence that they no longer have to think all the time, first of all, about the threat that's there for them, but can go on in confidence and do what Kenny says, simply meet people on the basis that this is somebody with who might want to do business through a meeting without having to calculate all the time is there a risk.
Although I do think there is a challenge in how we deal with the past. We can't ignore it. But, you know, I'm hearing through your memories, doing great work on conversations and dealing with the past.
Jim McGarry pointed out last night when we started looking at the past, we don't know how far back to look, and we never stop. We'll always find something to be in. Ken?
Actually, Duncan took the words out of my mouth in terms of the past being the greatest challenge. I'm involved in a number of organisations that look very much so at that issue. And I do think that it isn't dozens of people, there are hundreds of thousands of people in Northern Ireland who feel particularly sore at what they see as a lack of justice being delivered for them in the city. They haven't received that as yet. And it doesn't help whenever you have peaceful inquiries going on left, right and centre. For them, there seems almost to be an avalanche of stories and they're sort of brought up about a narrative that happened here that they are not willing to accept or be comfortable with. So I would ask the question, people always say, can we afford not to draw a line on the past? I actually believe that we cannot afford to draw a line on the past. There has to be a meaningful end game to it all. And I think that if we would our pearl.
I think Kenny has certainly hit the nail on the head on that particular line. It's something that we will ignore or parallel because it will come back to haunt us. Again, have we any other? Oh, sorry, we got the meeting tonight. It wasn't deliberate.
As you know, I'm standing as the Ulster Youth candidate in that very safe seat of West Belfast.
Is that why Jerry?
That's why I told Jerry. It's not But the challenge that I see in West Belfast, and it applies to all of Northern Ireland, is removing those remaining gatekeepers who are stopping us from achieving what we want to do. And I mean that primarily in the two parties who will attempt anything to stop us from moving this country to where it should be. Last Thursday I was invited to Polglass to attend an event organised by young women from that community who were launching their own peace symbol. It was a really, really interesting event. And these young girls, all from Catholic upbringings, produced this symbol that gave messages that they wanted to put out in relation to our future, Northern Ireland's future. One of the messages was to make mixed marriages acceptable because I want to choose who I fall in love with. And that, for me, just shows how our young people get it. How so many of the people we have here get it. What I don't understand is why the two biggest parties sitting in Stormont don't get it.
No, you can't, because I'm going to the last question and you're not going to get the chance to say to shut up. East London, Jerry, nil. We have one final question, and again, if somebody can show me a hand, we get one final question.
What we've identified, it seems to be through the panel, is that what we have is a legalistic system of equality whereby separate but equal will satisfy far too many people in terms of the dominant political representatives at the minute. We seem to have an agreed panel saying we need to move on to what's a genuinely shared future. We don't require a law, we require respect and tolerance, and we don't require it to be a legalistic approach. How do we move from A to B? How do we grow trust so that people can leave the legalistic approach behind and embrace respect through trust?
What actually I think from community relations potential we want to see is at one level, you're always arguing for big high-level things, so policy, strategy, all of these things. It doesn't mean anything unless it's turned into actual facts on the ground. And I think when we were looking at the CSI document as proposed, our biggest criticism of the document is it doesn't actually spell out in detail what you're going to do and what this looks like. Now, I suppose we can start talking in detailed policy terms and go on forever, but I'll give you 2 or 3 examples of the kind of thing I'm talking about. First of all, I think in terms of our public institutions and assets, we should be looking to make them all very much open access places. Now, what does that look like? For example, stuff like how you run very basic like town centres. Are they safe for everybody to go to? And are they open, accessible? Do we have good? Do we have evidence that everybody's using those facilities? So, for example, in Derry, is everybody going into the city centre? Is it open to everybody? Is there a nighttime economy developing there for everybody? And so on. So there's a kind of public space development issue. On education, there are lots of ideas actually and particularly I think the one that captured us was in the Bain report, quite simple things around how you deal with the real estate problem that we have now. So we have far too many desks. Can we find creative ways to use this as an opportunity, not to force sharing, not to force some kind of artificialness in people's relationships, but to say, in Oma, there is an army site which could become used as a shared campus where people can rub along each other in a different type of a way. Where, for example, if we need to develop sports facilities for towns or rural areas, can we open the up to schools? Can we use those? Can we share those as an ordinary, everyday kind of basic behaviour? That's happening, for example, in Valley already, or Belfast or something, where people are saying, we have a specialism in languages, you come to us for that in sixth form, you have a specialism in science, you come to us for those, whatever those might be. These are just examples of very practical steps that you can take. In terms of, for example, we've been working with district councils around they just seem kind of small, but you know, at the moment in Belfast, for example, all of the public events are in the Panellists Gardens. Can we start to share those out a bit? And can we start to say to people, part of the deal is that everybody has to be safe coming here, so that people get used to moving around the city? Can we change the transport network so that everything doesn't end at the city hall, so that people start to have connections across the city and that it's safe to do so? These are very practical things I'm at. But I suppose for us in the Community Relations Council, the key thing is, what is a cohesion, sharing and integration strategy about? It's saying the direction we have to go in everything is maximising the access for people, the openness for people, and the opportunities for people to engage on difficult topics. Once you start making that your principle, and you start building that, there are things in education you have to do, there are things in housing we have to do, there are things in culture policy we have to do, there are things in community safety we have to do, there are things in economics we have to do, and I could talk all day. But you asked the question, which is how do we get from here to there? We need to get these ideas into the core of very practical policies to say progress looks like taking the opportunities we have without necessarily forcing people, but certainly taking all the opportunities we have, and over, maybe it's a 10-year period, maybe it's a 20-year period, but in 10 years or 20 years we look back and we say what was previously not possible has become normal. And I think we've already got it. In politics, I have to say, I think we have experience of this. My last point. People think good relations is about harmony, some kind of nice new age home for everybody. And part of the difficulty in Northern Ireland has been that the easiest way to get harmony is to say nothing. Is to basically have silence. So community relations meeting turned out to be a meeting where everybody goes into a room, has a cup of tea, says nothing, says that was a great success, and goes home and says, my goodness, fine, what are the hard questions? Putting something around it, getting the right people around the room, finding the context in which you can actually have a constructive conversation and finding some practical steps. And you know something? On that basis over the last 20 years, we have made enormous progress. We have dealt with things like paramilitarism, we've dealt with policing, we've dealt with getting constitutional arrangements together, we've put up restorement, we have done a lot. I suppose what I would say is, the issue in CSI, now we have an opportunity to start going into the really practical things, the things that make a difference to people, their schools, their way they shop, where people can go, all those kind of things, and that's the key bit. So the answer is, let's get this built into the way we think about things, and we move from A to B by taking a step, moving into it, getting used to it, and then taking the next step. And that's a very simple question.
Says that for some people.
It's not simple at all. Yes, of course I agree. Of course I agree with that. I'm going to take a slightly different angle. To me, it's about people. It's about individuals. And it's about moving people along, building trust. It's looking at your culture, who you are. And I work with a lot of single identity groups who aren't ready to take the step. Looking over contentious issues and cultures in ways that are different. So it's working with those people, gaining trust. They learn about themselves, about their own culture, and that's enhanced, and then they're ready to move on. So that's very, very important. You know, at the beginning of the conversation, I said working with a loyalist state who are going now to meet Republican prisoners. 6 miles down the road, there is also a community that I've been working with that are asking me questions and looking at issues that I did 10 years ago. So they are that far behind. So they need to be encouraged. And there are pockets all around Northern Ireland that communities are way, way behind. So there's still a lot of work. And just finally, obviously, community relations budgets should not be cut in any way.
Bill?
I'm going to take the question on much more focused points. What could we, as the UUP, do for this issue? What we can do, and it was great to listen to the leader speak before lunch with such strength and vigour around the inclusion that he sees, his vision for this party, what unionism really is. As a party, we have an opportunity to take this message to the doors over the next 6 months. And I don't just mean doors of our traditional unionist voters, voters are traditional unionist voters. What we need to do is to take that message out that we're a party that wants to address education. We're a party that wants to address employment. We're a party that wants to address healthcare. It doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, you're Muslim, you're Catholic, you're Protestant. We are a party for Northern Ireland, and we will put Northern Ireland first. What we as the UUP can do is start voicing that we are already there and start getting people to follow us.
Kenny?
Thanks, Ross. Yes, picking up on a thread, I suppose, from Lesley, I do believe that it's very much about human relationships. And no matter what you have from the top down, from God, unless there actually is acknowledgement and willingness amongst people at ground level that is a place where they need to be, they have to make that decision for themselves. And I suppose it's more predominant within the unionist community, and we tend to be more defensive of people. And if someone saying that you like to see the colour of your money, also not. We don't go into things sometimes from a process point of view, where you start somewhere and you're not quite sure where you end up. We like to approach things in a contractual way, that I want to see what I'm signing up to, and I want to deliver something to it. And almost there has to be a sea change within our thinking if we are progressing that way. But just to give a few practical examples, I think in recent years, obviously from coming from a point of view of having a particularly difficult relationship with the Republic of Ireland, broadly speaking, unions from right across the spectrum now see that particular nation as on our doorstep, as our neighbour. Now, it doesn't mean to say that we ever want to be part of that nation, but we can have an amicable relationship with them, a responsible relationship, which is of mutual benefit to all of us. So I suppose going forward it has to be at ground level rather than wherever we come from. And certainly as a party, we have those messages to put out and about. We have to try and discredit how people try to portray this party, that we're narrow, that we have to be of a particular view rather than to be. This party is the most broad church political party in Northern Ireland, and that's to its strength, and that should be represented in the voting base that actually supports this party.
I think we all noticed that Duncan made reference Mr. Mumma, which is the county town of Tyrone and West Tyrone. And any of you are doing a day someday, you've got the better do. Come and see them with the county town of Tyrone. On your behalf, I would like to thank the panel, Kenny, Bill, Lesley, and I think more importantly, Duncan Morrow, for the community relations guys. Thank you very much.